Slovak republics, for example, this battle of Dukla, which was important during the Slovak national uprising. And you again can see those important events through the eyes of Romani participants, in this case, Romani partisans and soldiers. So we also want the database to be used for education by teachers, scholars, anybody interested, in order to add the perspective of Roma and Sinti on the history of our region. What is the basis of the database are detailed abstracts of testimonies. We are focused on published testimonies, and it is often claimed, and we just spoke about it, that that most of the testimonies of Roma and Sinti are in the collections in America, like in Fortunov Archive or Shoah Foundation. We think that there are many more testimonies hidden in different journals, anti-fascist publications or volumes published, some of them already during the communist regime. And so this part we are finishing this year, Czechia and Slovakia, and the number of the testimonies will be around 200 or a little bit more than 200. So the testimonies were published mostly in Czech, Slovak, and Romani or Romanes. And this is also why we think it's very important to make detailed abstracts so that they are accessible to anybody. There is also a Czech version, and we are preparing a Romani version of the website as well. If you can see, for example, this testimony František Daniel, you can also click on Show on Map, and there you can see the trajectories, the war trajectory of this person who was born, as you can see in this green spot, in Moravia, was then like, do you see it? My spot? No. So yeah, I would have to do it here. So he was first in a concentration camp in Hodonín, then was imprisoned in Brno before he was deported to Auschwitz, and from Auschwitz he was sent to two other concentration camps in Germany. Sorry. You also find a detailed description about the origin of the testimony, because as you know, and especially for scholars, it's very important under which circumstances the testimony was created. Sometimes it was written by Roma and Sinti. In many cases, it's based on an interview, so you have the whole background, also when it was done, and also down you have where to find this testimony, and you can. So this brings you to the printed version, which is often not available, but you can find it in some libraries. So all in all, now you can see where Czech and Slovak Roma were imprisoned. It was not only in Protectorate Moravia and in Slovakia, but also in many places in Germany, in Hungary, or even in France. And we have much more there, but because I should be very short, this is the last slide. We also show the places of resistance. That's the fist. The place of rescue. Those are the hands. The trees are marking places where Roma were hidden, and there are also places of mass massacres. And you can also see with the crosses. You can see many such places. If you are online, and you can try it now, if you click on any of these icons, it brings you directly to the testimony where you can read about this. So this is very briefly the introduction to our database. I could speak more about it. We are now, I already spoke with Dr. Talevich we would like to cooperate with her to do the Polish, the testimonies in Poland, and we are looking for partners also for other countries. So that's for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Katerina. I mean, she already introduced two interesting topics that we can discuss later about the archives, these hidden archives that we can, the hidden with many testimonies that we need for research, and also about the image, how Roma and Sinti are shown, you know, and what is the real image of the testimony. So let's go with our second speaker. She's Maria Bogdan, I think. Yes, you are the second one. On the list. She's a researcher now, research fellow from the Fortunov Archive, but she's in the Vienna Central Institute for Holocaust Studies. And she's currently doing an interesting and very important research on the social process of cultural trauma of the Sinti and Roma communities. So please, your time. No, you can stay there. You can take the microphone, please. Okay, and you have works? 8 minutes maximum.
Okay. So how much time do I have? Like 5 minutes or 8?
Between 5 and 8 minutes. Okay. If you keep it 5, then we have more time to discuss.
Okay, it will be very short. So welcome everyone. It's an okay, like this. Okay. So welcome everyone. It's an honor to be here in this conference. And so we were told not to prepare a presentation. So, well, I tried to be interesting with my words. So I think I should talk about what I research and how I research it. So I'm Wiesenthal, Fortunov Research Fellow at the Wiesenthal Institute for Holocaust Studies. Which means that I'm engaged with testimonies, mostly that I could find in the Fortunov video archive, Roma testimonies. There's no so much, and within there's no so much accessible. And the way I ended up here, so I'm a media scholar and a cultural theorist. I'm not a historian. So my first research was focusing on the media representation of Roma. And I constructed a hypothesis after my research, which is that the mainstream media representation of the Roma puts Roma again and again in the position of the stranger in society. And after I was done with this research, which was my PhD research, so it wasn't just like this, then I wanted to focus on the movement. How do we talk in the movement, in the transnational Romani movement? What are we doing there, and what is that self-representation about? And at the end of that research, I came up with another hypothesis that the main concepts of this talk, which I named as trauma talk, are belonging, resilience, and resistance. And I call it trauma talk because we can see here too, I mean, it's a concentrated event, but there's a deconstructive movement going on within our transnational movement, which is about deconstructing the Roma identity and coming up with something that we like, which is habitable for ourselves, right? And how do we do it? We are leaning back to all those traumatic events which are defining our presence, our position as strangers in society. And one of them is Holocaust. And I wanted to go on further with this research, and that's how I ended up among many historians as a media scholar, and who had this experience already knows what it means. And I wanted to go back to the roots, and I wanted to see how what testimony tells about these concepts. And my main focus is on the belonging, the sense of belonging. And so what I do with these testimonies, this is a transnational research, so I don't stay in one country. As it was mentioned before today, I also understood now that that's progressive. And for me, in my mind, this is how we are. We are transnational, and we should understand our experience transnationally. So I wanted to do, so this is a research in progress, so I just started. And I'm working with testimonies, and the methodology that I try to use is critical discourse analysis. And I understand these testimonies as trauma talk. And if we go back to the literature, there's a lot of literature on testimony and trauma. Then we know that this is, I mean, it was good to see that it's not only me, of course, that the testimony is a cultural trauma construction. And what happens in that interview situation, if we can put it into words, we experience, as the literature says, we experience the crisis of truth, because that's an interview situation which is reflecting the everyday life, but the interviewee has to talk about something which is out of the everyday narrative. And that's impossible. But in the end of the interviews, if you look at a testimony, you can have the feeling that some kind of feeling, like it was you learned something, or something about emotions, and even the interviewee could have that. But, and if you look at how they talk, and there is this expression, so what you can see many times, this is the conflation of the everyday and the extreme. When they try to express what happened to them by making comparison to everyday life. And it's because they want you to get something, right? But still, this is also the crisis of the listener. So, so this is an impossible thing we can say, but actually not really. So I'm focusing on belonging and this concept, and what was this concept for these survivors, what it meant to them. And there are many different examples. So it's about identity, or living somewhere, or as we could hear yesterday night, why did you, when there was this question like, why did you move back to Germany? Because that's my mother tongue, that's what we know, that's how we understand the world. But it's more complex than that. So I'm at the beginning of this, and I'm developing case studies. And it's very interesting because it reflects back to our narrative. And I should finish here, right? Yeah, it's so interesting, this research. And I'm very happy that we are together here in one panel, because this is something, this research is not a lar pour lar research. I mean, of course, it's interesting for me, but I do it because this is for us. And analyzing it and understanding what I read, which is impossible, of course, I would need other experts, Roma experts, right? Other scholars who are familiar with what I try to talk about. Because this is not, it cannot be a lar pour lar ego trip project. So I finish here, and we can later on go on together. I know that Anna's research is close to mine, and as I understand yours too, we will hear it. So let's go on. And we can also problematize the archive itself in this perspective, but I don't want to shoot now all the topics. Okay, thank you.
So thank you much, Maria. I think you are bringing a lot of topics also to discuss. The content of the interviews and the trauma concept, I think, is very important. I think for me it's very, very interesting. So we move with the third speaker, is Natalia, and I asked you before how to pronounce your surname, because I'm a Spanish speaker and we have many issues when we see many consonants together. Try to remember to pronounce right. So Natalia Katchenko, okay, thank you. And I think you have a presentation. She's coming from the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, and I think she's going to bring the topic about the memory of the Sinti and Roma in the educational activity of the International Center for Education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust. Thank you. You have also 8 minutes, maximum 8 minutes.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation, for the possibility to say a few words how we work with the memory of Sinti and Roma at the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. I am an educator, not a researcher, so I'm a person who connects the research and different sources that we have. We have mentioned some of them, like primary sources, oral history, documents of perpetrators, and also secondary sources like different scientific research with the people to whom we want to tell it, with whom we want to share it. So most of all, the main target group with us are young people visiting the memorial within study tours, within special educational projects. And also adults, quite often professional groups, like, for example, teachers who are multipliers later, or even in uniformed services like police or people working with different kind of similar services for our society. I work at the International Center for Education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust, which is in practice an educational department of the museum. And from the very beginning, of course, the history of Auschwitz includes Sinti and Roma as the third largest victim group. So from the very beginning, of course, this group is present in the narrative. However, what we also notice, the problem is, which was also mentioned in the exhibition outside, if you have had a look at it, that for a long time Sinti and Roma used to be on the periphery of this memory, so not in the focus. In our educational center we have different directions that you can see here. I work in educational projects, so have the possibility to create content with which we then work with different groups. Also trying to overcome this issue that although we speak about Sinti and Roma, they still stay on the periphery. We try to develop some lessons in which we try to include the variety of victim groups based on their stories, first descriptions of biographies. One of the first attempts with my team, was in 2018. And you can see the lesson that we developed. It was called Polish Citizens in Auschwitz. So under Polish citizens, we understood, of course, people who were Polish citizens, who lived in Poland before the war. And here among those people, among those 6 people who were in their 16th, 18th age, year of living, You can see some people who were ethnic Poles, some people who were Polish Jews, and you see Edward Paczkowski, who was a Polish Rome, and his story started to be presented in this workshop. In 2020-22, we did a project for Polish schools, which was called We Were United by the Independent Poland. The idea was to invite youth groups from different schools to come and visit the memorial, but then have this lesson. And there was a questionnaire made which showed that when young people were asked before this study day what were the victim groups at Auschwitz, most of them mentioned, of course, Jews and Poles. However, after the day, more than 20%, around 30% of young people started mentioning Sinti and Roma as one of the victim groups, which we considered to be a success within this group that participated in it. And we continued introducing this memory into our activity. This has already been mentioned by Katerina Czapkova, that the access to these testimonies is very limited. We had to search for different archives, sometimes very small archives, like the archive in IOZ Dessau, led by Jana Müller. Maybe some of you know her, who has been collecting interviews with Sinti and Roma, especially from German and German-speaking territories for a long time, and also the Shoah Foundation. So another example of a lesson where you can see Franz Rosenbach, who is presented with his story, is the lesson that is based on talking about the trauma of these people and how they dealt with it after the war. Franz Rosenbach in his interview is a very nice example in which he speaks about the impact that this persecution had on him. For example, that he, until the end of his life, he couldn't understand why he was arbeitsscheu, why he was considered to be unwilling to work, which was the term used by the perpetrators to speak about Sinti and Roma at the time. And here young people can, learn this idea and also see how one person, one life was impacted. And of course, this serves for creating some particular personal connection to this story. Thus, also introducing the stories of Sinti and Roma into this perspective, this focus of memory about Auschwitz and the Holocaust. With time, we also developed some materials that are available online. This example is called Memory for Zero, and you can Google it, you can find it in the open access. This is a set of lessons that we suggest as a pack, but you can also use some parts of it just to work with particular topics. And as you can see, it's based on personal stories, and also it gives us a bit of overview of different kinds of persecution. And a particular kind of persecution is racial persecution of Sinti and Roma, which had its characteristics which differed from the persecution of Poles as political prisoners, of Jewish people. So here, based on personal stories, we managed to find 6 stories that we used. We see how the life looked like before, during the persecution and after. This is one of the key elements also of working with survivors' testimonies, especially with young people, not to merge the life of a person to only the time that this person was persecuted. Of course, not to victimize these people once again after the persecution. So we try to show them as a personality, try to touch upon the identity issue, also trying to show young people that this identity was impacted, yes, and this was one of the key tragedies of people losing their identity or having to change it. And quite practically, we also have for different groups from all over the world lessons that we developed in the exhibition in Block 13. Maybe some of you know it or have visited it. It is in the row that is called the National Exhibitions with us. So this exhibition was developed in cooperation with the Heidelberg Center, and it tells the story of Sinti and Roma and their persecution in the time of the Nazi regime. We developed a lesson that we carry out with different groups in German, in English, and in Polish. So as you can imagine, it has a wide range of groups that partake of it. And I personally am an educator who also does this lesson, and I see how many young people really learn a lot about what was happening to Sinti and Roma, even sometimes learning who are Sinti and Roma before they start, digging into the story and trying to understand what was happening, how they were persecuted. So we also see how this contributes to the popularization of knowledge, but also to bringing Sinti and Roma back into the focus of this memory. And yes, one more minute. So the other thing that we are doing are also special projects that are dedicated to special dates, or not even always dedicated to special dates, sometimes just in our everyday routine. One of the projects that we are doing this year is dedicated to the anniversary of the liquidation of the so-called Zigeunerfamilienlager, and these are free study visits for young people. They also take place in German, English, and Polish, so different groups apply for it. A teacher can come with young people for one day, visit the memorial with focus on the story of Sinti and Roma, additional focus, I would say, and a lesson in the exhibition of Block 13. So we already are underway with this program, and it will last until the end of this year, thus commemorating the event that we are going to commemorate in the ceremony tomorrow. And this year also in August, at the end of August, we are hosting, it's an annual conference for teachers from Poland that we do. And this year's topic is Sinti and Roma exclusion, extermination, and memory. And we are going to talk about this aspect of teaching about Auschwitz and the Holocaust with teachers. We hope this will also multiply into classrooms, into also extracurricular activities in Poland much stronger as before. So this in brief, what examples we have, and I hope we'll have discussion about the details of it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. I think it's very important also to bring the topic of education. The education, and especially because also during this week is Dikenavistar, who is around more than 300 youngsters, just very close from here. And I think working with testimonies is going to be also like a challenge for the educational program of Dikenavistar. So I think it's also maybe very important to connect with the museum to see how to work with testimonies in the future. So next speaker is Dejan Markovic from Serbia, from the Forum Roma of Serbia, also a worker of Ergo Network, but I think he's bringing also a very important topic about collecting testimonies, especially from the Serbian, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and working with the transgenerational memories in these countries. So, Dejan.
Thank you, Annabelle. So I will talk about the quantitative research done in the Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina under the framework of the project which was implemented for Roma of Serbia and Otto Harin from Bosnia and Herzegovina with strong support of the Central Council of German Sinti and Roma and the VZ Foundation from Germany. The research was done from May to August 2023. Than last year's. So we conducted 70 interviews in Serbia and 30 interviews in the Bosnia and Herzegovina, covering many cities and the region. We spoke with the two different groups, those survivors who was born before 1941 and those who was born between 1942 and 1951. The first group give us the testimonies of individuals who have directly memories to the Second World War. Okay, sorry. Then second group help us to understand how memory are preserved and transmitted to those who did not experience of the Second World War directly. The interview was done by the Roma activist who received a special training for the scientific advisor who was many historians from the Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Related to the first groups of survivors, the response shared the memories of the hardship, including the fleeing from the soldiers, hiding hunger, family and community deaths, direct threats of execution, harassment and beating. Their childhoods were marked by fear of the soldiers, hunger and poverty. Particularly dramatic was the memory of losing close family members or witnessed these horrifying events such as the public executions. When it's come to the second generation, they also give us very memories related to testimony of the parents and relatives and friends. The story reflects aspects of the suffering during the war, including the fate of civilians and those who was fight together with the partisans. Harassment was frequently and unjustified, with families often hiding to avoid violence of certain death, while the rape of women left deep emotional scars for the next generation. Also, I want to highlight the challenge for preserving collective memories within the Roma community which we faced during these researches. Many of the survivors and the second generation was mentioned that stressed the importance of transmitting older generation experience to the young ones through the family practice. They believe that children should hear stories from the parents and grandparents to preserve the memory of Roma suffering during the war. Additionally, the role of Roma association communities is preserving memories is crucial. Informal gathering and citizen association should provide a space for exchanging experience and memories. Another problem was institutional support in the region such as Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. All respondents expressed dissatisfaction with the current institutional approach and emphasized for the need to state to take greater responsibility, get greater responsibility to this process. Schools programs should include the lessons, workshops, and panels dedicated to these topics. Also, we miss the public events and museum and monuments related to the suffering of the Roma in the Western Balkan region during the Second World War. And of course, there is very less books or publication related to these topics. And I also would like to mention that whole Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the whole Western Balkan region actually are a post-war region, and they also have the very fresh memory from the civil war wars during the 90s, and all of this atmosphere of the tangible atmosphere created day by day is really reflected to the testimony of this, especially Roma community who was suffering from this civil war. Especially case was in Bosnia and Herzegovina when the people want to stay anonymous. When we conducted the interviews, and there was some kind of fear to express their testimony, especially on the second generations. Also, I mentioned, but I also want to go deeper to the education system. We analyzed the education system in the Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we saw there is no any single sentence when it's come to the Holocaust and genocide of the Roma community in the Bosnia and Serbia, but similar things is in all Western Balkan country. We don't have any single institution who are working on the Holocaust genocide of the Roma in the Western Balkan. We start to negotiate and start this process with museum to collect certain artifacts related to the Second World War. But in generally, I must say that this is a big challenge. Big challenge is to museum to do this, because always when we say, okay, we would like to, make some kind of research or do some kind of exhibitions related to the Roma community, and they say, oh yes, but we are in generally museum who are dealing with genocide. We cannot separate Roma and and other victims, and I see really the problem that we should also concrete work with institution, and especially the museum during these topics. And what is also missing is the research related to the genocide to Roma on the Second World War, but as well the war of during the Civil War 30 years ago in the Western Balkan. I will stop here, and I will give more time for the question and discussion.
Thank you very much, Dejan. I think you brought also topics to discuss. I don't know if we are going to have enough time regarding the memoriam, the importance of transmitting, how this fear still is in the second generation, and how to preserve this memory through museums, memorials, and all the challenges that they are behind all this. We move on to our last speaker, Vera Tunsfeld from the Documentation and Cultural Center of Roma and Sinti and Roma. I think she's going to introduce the topic or present the current project she is coordinating, the Forgotten Memory Development of a Collection. And you have a presentation, yes.
Okay, thank you for being here. I would like to talk about the Forgotten Memory, our collection project, and I'm really happy that this collection project is connected to so many people, because we are connected to Maria's researches and to Katarina's, and yes, we collect and we connect. So at the Documentation Center in Heidelberg, we develop a collection. Now it is a collection of memories, and it is a collection of objects. Because there are some goals in our project, we try to conduct history because of a museum's collection. We create an archive of things. We conserve contemporary, because there are some stories from contemporary witnesses of curious and unseen hero stories. We create a future because we make visible that object and human relationships enabling a new research. And today, the project to tell you everything about would be a really, really, really long story, and sometimes maybe a little bit boring. But today I would like to speak about creating future from these objects of history. Okay, so I have here an example. This is a chair. We got this chair in our collection from a young Sinto. He sent us a message about from what's the word for that? Instagram, sorry. And this chair is from 1925. This chair belongs to a story of a family. Here's a photography from 1937. From 1937, and they're standing in front of a house. They were Sinti. They were standing in front of a house, a not done house. It is under construction while we see it. And this family was never deported. This family have had a really, really special story, I would like to think, and this is connected with the share. So if we bring it into a collection of memories, we have to tell a story about this family as well. This family, as Sinti, they were victims of the the laws from Rassehygienische Forschungsstelle, and they were under racial pressure. This family lived in this small town. This small town was a couple of hundred inhabitants there, and these inhabitants tried to save their neighbors. So they gave them a house. That house you see in the first photography in the background. They made them being their neighbors and they protected them, and it worked. But this share brings also the story of things which is lost, because the other families who were deported to maybe to Auschwitz or to other concentration camps lost everything they had before. Everything is gone, and there are some lists in Germany in small archives where it's written down what they lost, what the towns sold. This chair were in this house in 1973. The family built up the house. They were living there, and they were really, really well known in the society. And the person there in the middle of the photography from 1973, no, not, sorry, from 1937, was in the 80s still working there. Her name was Anna, and she had a card, because you have to try to bring identity cards, special identity cards. What you allowed you in Germany to sell stuff while going from door to door. She was the mother and the grandmother and the great-grandmother of people. One of the people you can see in the photography from 1973, the guy with the red shirt on the balcony. So there's another memory about the thing with this chair, because this chair was standing in the living room. I marked it here. This chair is related to so many stories. And this chair is also related to a new story, because now this chair where nearly 100 years the family were sitting on, were dining on, were fighting on, were laughing on, and did everything people do in their houses, is now an object of our collection. So you see the photography over there, where we try to understand this chair. We try to understand how we have to conserve it, that it will be living for the next 100 years, for telling all those stories are related to this chair. And so we did an interview with a really young person. The person there, Franz, he's just, I don't know, 27 years or 28 years now. And we collected his story about this chair on video to have a testimony about his journey with the chair, because this chair was the thing why he began to ask for his own family stories. Okay, and this is a story you can now find in our collection, and this is a base for new research. Okay, there we have some hashtags, and that's it. Thank you for your audience.
Thank you very much, Vera. Sorry. I think we can take 20 minutes to have a discussion between us, with the audience. You can ask questions, because we start 20 minutes late, and I think now is the lunch break, but I think it's very important session talking about testimonies, how also objects can tell stories, you know. And I have many questions, many things raised. One speaker and another speaker, and I was connecting all of them, but I would like to open the the floor to the audience. If you want to start a discussion, if you have a question, if you want to bring any other topic or something that has been discussed here, you please raise your hand. And we have Anna, our volunteer, and she will bring the mic to you. Anna? So, Anna to Anna.
Mohanausi Ana Dalila Gomez Baus, me abondo en romano. Ayacana cite de Dumape españolisco. Bueno, mi nombre es Ana Dalila Gómez Baus, vengo del pueblo gitano, yo vengo de Colombia, Bogotá, Colombia, y tengo una pregunta que es a María. Como sabemos que los ROM somos transnacionales, que si se tiene previsto hacer testimonios en Latinoamérica y si tienen algún contacto.
This is Ana Dalila Gomez Baus from Colombia, and her question is for Maria. Just as you were talking about the research, about the transnationality of your research, the question is, do you have planned any testimonies from Latin American Roms?
Thank you for the question. Well, no. I mean, so I wanted to bring up this topic here to problematize the archives. That's like, that could be included in our decolonizing all these institutions and all this deconstructing process. So I'm working on the fortune of archive, but of course I can search other archives. But if you look at these big archives which are focusing on, or has been focusing on collecting Holocaust survivor testimonies, sometimes you find double findings, but you also see that there are not so much testimonies made with Roma survivors. And as I understand the work of historians and the work of history, it probably happened because collecting testimonies started very, very late. Just to give you an example, or two examples. One of the examples is something that is not public, but I can just a little bit mention here. So there are, for example, there were many testimonies made with Slovak Roma Holocaust survivors in the end of the 1990s, early 2000. So imagine how old these people were. That was the first time they gave official, testimonies, like giving a testimony interview. That's a genre. So it's like it's not just like let's talk. So it's there's no receipt how to make a testimony, but still it's a kind of institutionalized thing. So but you don't see them because of other legal problems. They are not accessible. And if you see the other collections, you can see like the same interviews. The first ones, for example, I know it, were made by Gabriel Turnauer with the Sinti and Roma community in Germany. And those interviews were made officially prior to the, first to the importance of archive. But you can find those interviews in the US HMM archive. And it looks like we have many, but they're the same interviews. So, I'm at the beginning of this huge research, but like institutionalized testimonies I haven't found from people from Central America, but I already heard of research which are in making with third generation survivors who are living, for example, in the US and all over the world. But I think that's a very important topic that you mentioned. So here is another topic that we have to pay attention to. Thank you.
If I may add only, I definitely think it's very important to do more research about Roma in Latin America, also because it's very interconnected with the European Romani story. So as we have heard about the unique research in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think the same, even though it's really 5 minutes after 12 or maybe even more, it would be fantastic if there is a funding for this, because, for example, only from the small example of Czech and Slovak Roma and Sinti, I know from heart about 7 stories of post-war survivors who immediately after the war left for Chile or Argentina. So it would be very important to do this.
Just one comment that Anna wanted to make at the end is that imagine that if you feel invisible as far as Holocaust and Roms here in Europe, that feeling is even more profound and deeper in Latin America. So that's just as a final point.
I just want to mention here Ian Hancock, who made the first research on Roma in the Americas, and he has followers, other scholars, Roma scholars as well, who are doing it. So, this is not something that is ignored, but in this respect, probably it's not so well researched. Yeah, that's very important to say.
Thank you. Tatiana? Deb. Oh, Soraya didn't see you, sorry.
Hello everyone, my name is Tatiana Storoshko. I'm a historian from Ukraine, and as well I'm leading Roma youth organization called TENET. And first of all, I would like to thank all of our panelists for the very interesting and important presentations. And my question would be for Dr. Maria Bogdan. I find really extremely important and interesting your research. You were talking about how Roma are depicted in mainstream media, and it makes me think also. I was observing for quite a lot and also trying to do my own research how this representation in mass media, how this representation in mainstream media, how it influenced the way Roma activists, Roma organizations, how they self-represent, how they present themselves visually. Because I can see a lot of patterns that are being repeated there. And my question would be, from your point of view, what could be steps for decolonization, if we may say so, of this visual self-representation of Roma activists, Roma public figures, organizations? Thank you.
Okay, do we have time, like a lot of time? No. So, because this, thank you for the question. So this was, it's an ongoing research that I'm doing, this self-representation. And it started, of course, it's in itself, when we talk about representation and when we talk about media representation, it's a very important topic. But since the age of social media, it became a crucial part of the movement or us. And what I always say that when you look at the history so far, how social media started, the movement immediately discovered it, and it gave us, so this is the decolonization and deconstructing process that's going on. We started to use it because this gave us voice, and this gave us the possibility to connect And also for us, for the transnational movement, we can see that this is not just an ego platform, but this is a platform that we use to discuss topics. And so what activists are doing, and you know how, I'm not sure if I got it right, like how we fight against all these anti-gypsist contents mainly on social media. Well, we are trying, right? There are like many attempts how to do it, and they are in the face, you know, like in fake news or you name it, like what type of news, and or sometimes directly, like during COVID, we could see like directly discriminating and blaming and scapegoating Roma communities, for example, in Romania. And what do you do, right? That's a very important question. And of course, this is such a new thing still, although there are many types of social media platforms now. I'm active on Threads too, but you know what? So this is a discourse, but you would think that this is something else, but this is the same. But your tools are different. You can be, and you should be, for example, faster than in real life. It needs us to be reacting faster, and also there's a whole problem. How do you like? The institutional background of these social media platforms, they are not in parallel with the way we are thinking about, for example, racism. So I'm sure many of you have already encountered with this when you, for example, dare to report something that's a racist content, and then the question is on you, like, why? Then skip it. Like, I, for example, personally encountered with this option, like, don't look at that page. Like, that's what I got from Facebook, for example, as a solution. So I don't have a receipt how to fight, but this is a very important topic that, as I understand, some Roma organizations are, for example, the EHMRS, for example, they are addressing, and they're trying to, you know, with young activists, do something against it. But what I see, for example, the Hungarian example is, for example, I can come up with that. It's like my Hungarian Roma activist friends, they go on any posting or sharing fake news or racist content, and they engage in the comment section. That's like an endless war, but that's what we do. Like, we try to correct the information and raise awareness not to share it, don't believe in it. But, you know, the reactions are very different. For example, they can be kicked out of these social media sites for days because, you know, the far right is very strong on social media, so they report you if you fight against them. So there are no receipts, but I think what Gilda Horvath, my friend, always tells, she's a journalist, and my friend, and she always tells that it's important to take in consideration the algorithm, that this is something that you don't really influence, and basically what she tries to raise awareness of, that this is still an institutionally generated content. But I think what we are doing with it, it's a totally different thing as a community. So that's why it's on us, right? Sorry.
Soraya, you have a question.
Thank you. I don't think I will have time to put a question, really. My name is Soraya Post, but I would like to make a comment. And the discussion of how to enhance also the representation of Roma Sinti's testimonies. From my experience, there are not very many institutions today who welcome Roma, Sinti, how to say, or maybe they do today, but they didn't do like 6 years ago. I was in Washington on the Holocaust Museum, and the space of Roma Sinti Holocaust was like 10 square meters out of 1,000 square meters. And also like in Sweden, we are now going to start a Holocaust museum, and Roma are not even asked, and also not even have any economic funding to develop anything to participate in all this. And also when it comes to science, it's only towards anti-Semitism. So I can guess, and you don't need to answer because I know already the answer. There are a lot of obstacles at institutional level, political level of course, but also among these people who have been working for this cause. It seems that there is no place, even at these spaces, for my people. And can you do something about it? You don't need to answer. Can we do anything about it? At least we have to try. Thank you.
So, quickly, very quickly.
Yeah. Thank you, Soraya, raising this question, because we, in our research last year, we exactly challenged with this problem. The people who working in the institution dealing with the genocide and Holocaust during Second World War was not understand our movement and necessity to we have our cultural remembrance. So we find two monuments in whole former Yugoslavia. One was in Bosnia and one was in Serbia. When it comes to the institution, we don't even have 1 square meters related to the Roma. They just mentioned in one sentence the Roma was a victim of Second World War, and that's it. Without any names, without any artifacts, and without any documents related to the suffering of the Roma during the Second World War. So I think we have to connect all each others, or activists, the network of the researchers, the network of the institution who are working with this, but we also need political support and political willingness to on these topics.
30 seconds, please, Maria.
Just one more thing, because we forgot about the personal. So we are talking about when self-representation, the movement, but the movement is from, it's from us. So when it comes to social media, and I forgot in this quick analysis, it's always on us. So when we share, as you said, we share each other's content, but we share it, and you share it with your friends, so your friends can see it, and then you are interfering in this knowledge production process. So I always say the other thing that I think the best is not to react to these racist contents, but create new contents, create new topics to talk about, so you can get away from this racist perspective. And just, when you share, for example, when I shared, or people are tagging me on events like this, and my elementary school friends who see it and had no idea about any contents, any knowledge, and they can learn about it. And this is how we are decolonizing these spaces. Sorry.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for staying here. There is lunch in the second floor, so I think we are hungry, but I would like to thank again all the panelists, speakers from this panel. Maria, we are waiting for your research on the trauma.
And you also should talk about
No. I'm moderator. I'm moderator now. So Vera, thank you very much for presenting and how objects also can tell stories. Education is very important. We need also how to teach with using the testimonies. Then we will talk during the lunch about these testimonies from Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Just I want to mention we made the film, there is available on the forum webpage, so please.
But it's still pity, and I connect with Anna Dalia, that even in Europe, after 80 years, we're still talking about research. Then research is needed, and also the database, how important it is to collect all the testimonies so we have access to the testimonies. So thank you very much for staying here, and we can continue the discussion during the lunch, and just keep us connected all the time. Thank you.
us the order? Because I saw I was second, but can you tell us the order? Yeah, I was, but now I saw less people here, that's why.
I can tell you from here.
The order of the speaker.
The order of the punishment is Ladislav Balash first, Isabella Tiberiadis second, Isaac Skenderi third, Nicoleta Bitsu fourth, Isabella Michalaki fifth, and Michelle
Fifth, so there will be no time left. Thank you, guys. I have in advance. You have one page, you mean? That's not for minutes early.
Say a few words.
Well, it's what, 12 cents?
Testing. Ah, this is on always. I don't know what to do. Thank you for coming and apologies for the delay. We are still waiting for the technicians to help us with an extra table, which is coming. Yeah, dziękuję bardzo. And hopefully by then there will be more people joining us, and then slowly we start. Thanks for your patience. Where there's will, there is a way.
Is this yours?
Yes.
Here we go.
Traditional Roma.
That's exactly
I
what
know
we're
my
trying
place.
to stop.
Exactly. I know my place, some will say. You know what?
I don't think more people will come.
Which means, yes, we will start very soon. Just let me connect my laptop. I need that. My laptop's battery is really weak. Okay, so let's see.
This part is not streamlined, Stefan? Because I announced this is after 10 people. There's nothing to watch.
Our session is not streamlined. It's your loss. I just connect this. I hope it works well. Yeah, I think it works. We have some. Yes, thank you.
This is not streamlined, no? That's the problem.
The moderators have.
I don't see this session streamlined. They don't
Hello,
streamline this.
welcome.
Is it? I don't see it on the link. You see maybe the main so or main maybe just the main let me try and see. Ask because he didn't hear me.
Let's see if we can move this even further.
Or is it? I think maybe this is just that we didn't start. No? Maybe once we start, I'll see.
Isa, that's the mic. Thank you.
Maybe you should come closer to me so that just seem to be a little bit hidden unless you don't want to be closer to me.
It's fine. It's hidden and forgotten Holocaust, as it's called.
We're trying to get rid of that.
Test. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this parallel session 4.2, titled Remembrance, Recognition, Justice and Trust Building, Transitional Justice Tools to Address Anti-Gypsyism in Europe. My name is Dan Dogi. I'm a Roma myself from Romania, and I have the honor and the pleasure to facilitate this panel. We have 6 distinguished panelists today. Each of them will speak in between 5 to maximum 8 minutes, perhaps even shorter, given the fact that we started with a delay. And without further ado, then I would like to just give you brief information about the purpose of this session, and then we start with the speeches of the panelists. So the panel explores transitional justice tools to combat anti-Gypsyism in Europe, focusing on remembrance, recognition, and trust building. It features various current political struggles, including the advocacy for the recognition of racist pogroms and the need for post-war justice for Roma in the Western Balkans. The panel aims to highlight the strategies of transitional justice and to build coalitions to strengthen the acknowledgement of the past experiences of Roma and Sinti in order to advance non-recurrence and equality. And first speaker today is Mr. Ladislav Balaš, who's a human rights activist and will speak about fight for justice for victims of racist attacks in Czech Republic. Mr. Balaš has been a human rights activist for the past 33 years, working on justice for Roma in Czech Republic and the UK. Mr. Balaš, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ladislav Balaš, and I would like to talk about little Natalka from Vítkov, which I representative in the court and police. In 1999, starting neo-Nazis attacked family in Vítkov, and they found them like 2 people, walking and try find Roma family, and they starting attack them by bottle Molotov cocktail. And 1 bottle shoot for that baby. She was old 1.5 years. She have now 80% burn body. It's very hard, and very hard I can talk about that, because physically I was finished, because I have child as well. When they shoot that bottle for that girl, she burned very fast. Next day I came in with my friend Markus Pape. And that family, mayor of city Vítkov, put in dogs building. That is house for them, emergency, dog building. When I talked to mayor city in Vítkov, they told us that is Roma, they don't need house. I'm starting shouting and turn in Prague and talk with government, because I was MP in 1999, and police after that make confirmation with me, and we work together. That Nazi first time in our country charged 22 years. From my point is too small, but very high in first time when we started representative family. Now that person, neo-Nazis, try get out from prison. After 13 years, they going out to neo-Nazi. And court not information us. That is wrong. Next two still stay in prison. And they try going out now. And we stop them. Because that girl still is in hospital. Every year have operation, skin. She walking in the school, she cry because she have pain. No one help her from town where she live. We try find people who help her. I driving with her in hospital every week. That is very hard position, very hard. But I would like to tell you just one word. I wish and send message any country to try representative Roma like me, because that is only in Czech Republic. I never heard in different country in Europe who will be representative Roma. Everywhere is lawyer. But where you representative like Roma, that Roma have more power. They feel lucky. That is my message. Thank you so much.
And we thank you, Mr. Balash, and for keeping up with the time. Most of us know the case of Natalka and the suffering she has been through throughout the years, the dozens of surgical interventions in the past which are still continuing, and the trauma and the suffering. But we also saw her bubbly personality, and recently there was a new article about her story, and she was presented with all her dreams and ambitions as a young person. We take note of your important message that we all have to try our best to represent the interests of Roma. Also as a way to prevent the occurrence of such terrible acts on the side of extremists and extreme right groups. And we also take note that although the perpetrators were charged, we still feel that justice was not fully served, especially that only after 13 years the perpetrators were freed from prison. Thank you. Next we have as a speaker Ms. Isabella Tiberiade from Documentation Center Lichtenhagen in Memory. She will speak about remembrance and recognition of the racist pogroms in Rostock, Lichtenhagen. Isabella comes from a Romani traditional family from Romania. She was involved for the past decade in the Roma Genocide Remembrance Initiative and was a contributor to a local initiative for the survivors of the Roma genocide and deportations to Transnistria. Her work focus aims to advance the work of Roma civil society and to help the creation of international partnerships addressing the issue of pogroms and effects of anti-Gypsyism on the Roma communities. Isabella, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I will present very briefly that this conference is happening at the same time with the educational program of the Kinabistar. And it's a very nice surprise that we offered the theme of the project as a sunflower because it's an important symbol for the Roma. And the great Romni, Ceea Stoica, survivor of Holocaust activist and artist, has this symbol all over her paintings and text. And this year, on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of 2nd of August 1944, in Dikina Bistar, we gave honor to Ceea's love for the sunflower, as she calls it, the flower of the Roma. Working with the symbol of sunflower has started years ago when working with the local initiative from Craiova to represent the interest of the Roma survivors from the genocide in Transnistria and from the pogrom in Rostock. In one of the largest racist pogroms at the end of the Second World War II, a racist mob attacked the Sonneblumen house, the sunflower house, in the German city of Rostock-Lichtenhagen. And the attacks were several days in August 1992. More than 200 Roma families arriving from Romania, mostly from Craiova, as asylum seekers, have been living in the building and working alongside contract Vietnamese workers. And thousands of attackers, but nothing happened. Thousands of people stood by watching them and clapping, and the building was set on fire. They were saved all by themselves without the help of the police or the firefighters. And the answer of the recent reunified Germany was mass deportation and stricter immigration laws. The initiative of victims from Craiova has been fighting for the acknowledgement of the pogrom they suffered and for justice, also from a civic point of view, but also from a law. The sunflower has been used by neo-Nazis and fascists to provoke and advance further their racist agenda. And we are taking the symbol back now as a reminder to include space for resistance through remembrance and memorialization, and to advance the fight for justice, truth, and reconciliation. The pictures of the burning sunflower went all around the world, and after the pogrom, fundamental tightening laws of asylum and justification of racist violence were on the agenda. For those affected, there was no support or apologies. And there's something very important about this case. And if we think about it, is that all of the Romanians were either victims, survivors of the Roma genocide and deportations from Romania, or they're second generations. And my question would be, how would this change the narrative in the politics of Germany when taking this project? How we can actually change the narrative and to conclude that include Romania in changing the term from deportations to Transnistria and to make it as genocide. The perspectives and voices of the affected have not been part of the commemoration of the pogrom in Lichtenhagen for the past 30 years. But in 2022, on the 30th anniversary of the pogrom in Lichtenhagen, we managed with the initiative to bring the narrative and to bring the voices of the Roma affected and to actually mobilize structures from Germany, but also to try to connect those structures with Romania and to create an initiative. The demands and concerns of those affected have crossed the narrow walls of Craiova and reached higher audiences with the potential and strength to aid in delivering solutions. Their most acute concern is racism, antigypsyism, and how it has never been balanced by the ongoing sufferings of the Romani communities from the Second World War II, communism and post-communism. I am here to talk on behalf of the Roma people, Romanian citizens who have been learned silence as a language rather than to have their voice. My presence here is to represent the Roma communities affected by the program and to compensate for the hiatus of 30 years from the public narrative, remembrance, recognition, and commemoration. There are a lot of lessons that we could actually learn from this case when we are discussing justice, this case specifically from Rostock, when it comes about alliances between countries to tackle important cases of racism. Both Germany and Romania could not handle this very well. And we often ask ourselves, what does Rostock pogrom mean to us and the community, but also what does it mean for us as a structure? What can actually bring back to us if we continue on working with it? Long-term events in history teach us that it is so easy to identify the perpetrators and to neglect the victims. If we look after 1945, we have to recognize that there was no complete change, not in Romania, not in Germany, in the system, but instead a continuation of the widespread of antigypsyism among the mentality of society, political leaders and institutions. We need remembrance, recognition, advocacy at institutional level, and to create political institutional agreement between Romania and Germany to address the effects of the pogrom. We had a very long struggle for justice and recognition for the Roma genocide. And also it comes in the same manner for the pogrom in Rostock. I think it's time to create coalitions and to talk more with each other rather than about each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabella, and for keeping it short. It's important that you mentioned the Cannabis There initiative, which was at the forefront of many initiatives bringing together Roma youth and helping them get involved in matters concerning them and concerning their interests. It's interesting that you mentioned about the sunflower as a symbol of Roma. This is something new also for me personally, so I look forward to learn more about this. Indeed, the pogrom in Rostock back in 1992 is an incident, a racially motivated incident that is not well known. So it's always good to remember that after the Roma Holocaust, there were manifestations, extreme manifestations of racism and societal rejection towards Roma in many places, but they were not properly documented. They are still not properly acknowledged. Victims have not benefited of reparations and compensation. Indeed, coalitions are the way to go, and I'm happy to hear that in 2020 there is apparently an initiative which brings together state representatives from both countries, Romania and Germany, to work towards proper recognition of this program and work towards prevention of similar situations, as well as to explore the possibilities for compensation for the victims. Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Isak Skenderi from Voice of Roma, Ashkali and Egyptians, Kosovo, who will speak about fight against anti-Gypsyism and the need for post-war transitional justice for Roma. Mr. Skenderi is a Roma from Kosovo and the executive director and one of the founders of the organization Voice of Roma, Ashkali and Egyptians. And prior to founding this NGO, he worked with various international NGOs and state agencies. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the marginalization of Roma communities and the need to participate in the dealing with the past, also known as transitional justice processes, while making the reference to our example in Kosovo and the conflict during the 90s. So, during the 90s and the conflict, the Roma, Ashkali and Egyptians in Kosovo have faced severe victimization, and they continue to endure marginalization and discrimination today as well. Now, transitional justice and the fight against anti-Gypsyism are deeply interconnected. Transitional justice seeks to address the legacies of large-scale human rights abuses and aims to bring about reconciliation and rule of law, yes. So our country has, since long time ago now, started transitional justice processes. However, one of the challenges was inclusivity and how much the Roma in our country, Ashkelon Egyptians also have been included in these processes. But for us, these processes also mean that addressing antigypsyism and systematic discrimination that have caused marginalization and victimizations are essential to understanding and building the way towards equality. So by incorporating efforts to combat antigypsyism within transitional justice framework, we not only recognize and redress the historic and ongoing injustices faced by these communities, but also work towards creating an inclusive society where all ethnic groups have a place. Now, this approach ensures that transitional justice is truly comprehensive, addressing not only the aftermath of the conflict, but also the underlying prejudice that can fuel future violences and discrimination. In conflict countries like Kosovo, the war spread rapidly and consumed the entire society, leaving no one untouched. However, evidence suggests that existing anti-Gypsyism may have led to significantly higher consequences for Roma and other communities perceived as Roma or derogatorily labeled as Gypsies, Majub, or Tsigan in our society. So this deeply rooted prejudice has not only worsened the victimization of these communities during the conflict, but has also influenced societal perceptions post-conflict, softening the existence of the suffering. So in this perspective, from our point of view, the anti-Gypsyism in conflict situations can also be both the cause and the consequence of violence and discrimination. When discussing the past, now it's clear that Roma Ashkelon Egyptians have been largely left out of the transitional justice processes, and it is crucial to ask why. So there is no legitimate reason for treating these communities differently from the majority population or other minority groups in Kosovo. The reasons may be political, but once again, they are also deeply embedded in discrimination and anti-Gypsyism. So, despite the suspected elevated levels of victimization among Roma and other communities, suffering during and after the conflict remained underdocumented. OSCE and various other agencies have attempted to address this, but witness intimidation and lack of resources have hindered these efforts. And also during the previous panels, we have understood how much have the similar factors also affected documentation regarding the suffering during the World War II. So in our case, also, stories of abuse and violence remain shrouded in silence, continuing a cycle of marginalization. As crucial as it is to initiate transitional justice processes for Roma concerning their victimization due to anti-Gypsyism, post-conflict situations like Kosovo require a comprehensive approach. So dealing with the past cannot overlook the conflict itself and focus solely on historic injustices. Instead, addressing anti-Gypsyism must be integrated into broader efforts aimed at addressing the conflict. However, in our country, transitional justice is often misunderstood and narrowly associated with the criminal justice. It is frequently perceived as being opposed to reconciliation, targeting specific power holders or groups, or being manipulated for political reasons, which represent a significant barrier to fully address this issue. So while anti-Gypsyism is indeed being discussed, the conversation remains incomplete because of these misconceptions. This is important because we know that the key aim of transitional justice is to achieve the reconciliation, improving interethnic tensions, and fostering a shared national identity. This only works if the new national identity is inclusive, allowing members of different ethnic groups to see themselves within this new framework. So transitional justice processes, by itself, they have to be inclusive if wish to achieve the objective. So while dealing with the past, structural reasons like historic marginalization, discrimination, and anti-Gypsyism must be addressed to guarantee that violence does not recur. Unfortunately, in our case, the international community in Kosovo has prioritized fixing tensions between the Serbian and Albanian communities, often sidelining the atrocities committed against Roma and other communities as collateral damage. It is essential to understand as well that addressing economic, educational, and housing issues, while important, will not make a sustainable difference if disconnected from the past. So the conflict of the 90s, in our specific case, was not static. It had multi-perspective dimensions and need to be acknowledged to avoid repeating the same mistakes. And in this case, it needs to become inclusive towards all the communities in order to, as we said, ensure that there will be no reoccurrence and hopefully reach the long objective of developing a peace in the post-conflict and reconciliation in post-conflict situations like Kosovo. So that would be everything that I had to say for this presentation. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skanderi, for sharing with us this particular situation of Roma Ashkali Egyptians in Kosovo during and post-conflict. This is indeed a kind of unique situation where Roma were severely persecuted and marginalized, but I would add here also the aspect of scapegoating. As it happened in my work at the OSCE, I became more familiar with this terrible predicament of the Roma being kept in the middle of the warring parties, the ethnic Albanians and the Serbians, and each of them blaming the Roma as being traitors or collaborators with the enemies, and therefore being at a loss from every direction. I remember the flourishing Roma community in Mitrovica with huge houses and a great tradition, which was destroyed. I mean, people fled the conflict, left their houses and goods and everything, and then those houses were looted, some were burned, and they were taken abusively into possession by the majority population. I also know that most of the Roma who fled the conflict never returned, and still today they were never compensated for their loss. Indeed, the post-conflict societal perception is very important, and I take your point that addressing this issue of anti-Gypsies, which in that case is both a cause and a consequence of violence, requires a comprehensive approach. It needs to be inclusive and have at its core the fight against anti-Gypsies well integrated in all policies and interventions. With this, I move forward to the next presenter, Dr. Nicoleta Bițu, from Partida Romilor Pro-Europa, Romania, will share with us information about pogroms in Romania in the 90s and about mobilization, justice, and political context. Nicoleta Bițu has been active in the field of Romani human and women's rights for more than 30 years, being at the forefront of the European mobilization of Romani women activists and of advocacy for the rights of the Roma. Nicoleta, please, you have the floor.
That's when you're too old in the Romani movement. So my intervention today was supposed to be an objective one, but I cannot do it because that's about part of my personal history. So I will be partially emotional and I will not excuse myself for that. I'm here to talk about the beginning of the 90s and what happened in Romania in the beginning of the 90s is an illustration of an ongoing anti-Gypsyism and ongoing hate against Roma in our societies. In the beginning of the 90s, after the revolution of 89 December in Romania, a series of pogroms took place in Romania. 67 localities were affected by violent conflicts between December 89 and January 97. At different degrees of violence, houses burned down, people killed, people expelled from villages where they used to live in the forests, and people lived out in the improvised tents for a couple of years during the winter, during the summer. So that's part of our history which nobody speaks about it, nobody teaches about it, it's hidden, it's unspoken, and we are unfortunately not many Romani activists left alive to talk about that. I was one of the Romani activists who have documented and lived with the victims of these pogroms, next to them, with them, and sometimes shared pain with them. What happened is that these 67 localities were not served justice. Some of them ended up in the European Court for Human Rights, but not all of them. Most of them who ended up in the European Court of Human Rights, it was because some of the resources were allocated to these cases because there were more, more people suffered than others. But justice was not served. So it is what it is, but I would like to say that because of this mobilization of ourselves around the suffering of our people, some of the systemic changes happened in Romania. And these were, for example, the language in which the prosecutors talked about Roma. Our Roma people didn't have a name or surname when prosecutors documented these cases. They were the gypsies from the localities. They didn't have a name. The legal assistance appeared as a practice in the Romani movement. We also contributed to the anti-discrimination law in Romania because of that. However, we had to fight with non-Roma to accept that these were interethnic conflicts. They didn't accept that these were interethnic conflicts or pogroms, because this is not about, by the way, we are here today commemorating 88 years. They used to say, it's about antisocial behavior, because they didn't, it's about antisocial behavior. It's not because they are Roma. It sounds very familiar, right? And for us young Romani activists in the beginning of the 90s, who didn't know much about the Holocaust history and the way Nazis were describing us, was not very kind of alarming. But for elders like Nicolae Gheorghe, who led us in this old struggle, the bells were ringing very, very high and very tough, because it sounded very familiar, and in terms of historical time, was not very much after 45. So this, for me, remains in my personal history one of the bells which wakes me up every time when I want to give up. When I want to give up to my activism, or to being involved, or to serve my people, I wake up when I remember the hate I felt on my skin when I went in the villages where the houses were burned. I basically felt the hate of non-Roma on my skin against my people, and I will never forget that feeling. It's the feeling which wakes me up and keeps me going every day. Sometimes with better energy, sometimes with worse energy. But my message is that if we do not want to forget, is for us not sleeping. Because if we go home and start sleeping, then the history will repeat itself. And the pogroms in Romania, it's a proof that the history is going to repeat itself if Romani activists forget about our Roma people. So this is my only message, and I thank you very much for that. I'm not going to go on what the states need to do. I'm just saying what we need to do in order to, save and to not repeat the history. Thank you so much.
And we thank you, Nicoletta Bizu, for sharing with us your personal experience as a Roma woman activist, being involved in documenting many of these dozens of cases, terrible cases of collective punishment and pogroms, racially motivated attacks against Roma. I took note of the hatred that you felt yourself as being there among the non-Roma in those communities, seeing that somebody's coming to help, especially those gypsies that were victims of the attacks. Hadaren is one of the well-known cases, also because of the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, which found a failure of the national judicial system in properly documenting and punishing the perpetrators. So it took, as in many or in most of the similar cases, it took the European Court of Human Rights to actually step in and bring justice to Roma. But we all know how long it takes, and that in the Hadaren case, it took maybe 14 years or so. So it takes a lot for the communities to feel that justice is served, and still most of those communities felt the opposite, that justice was not served. I take note of the bias of the prosecutors in their language used throughout the trials, and the minimalization of the Roma people as human beings by not calling on their names, but rather calling them as gypsies. And also the scapegoating, as they denied their racist motivation and pretexting that they were only taking a stand against the so-called antisocial behavior, which is, again, an old prejudice alluding to the deviant and the so-called deviant and criminal nature of Roma. So thank you for sharing this with us. Next, our speaker is Ms. Isabela Mihalake from Ergo Network, Alliance Against Antigypsyism. We'll speak about building a European alliance to advance transitional justice processes under the Chachipen/Yekipe project. Isabela has over 20 years of experience in addressing human rights violations and racism against various minority groups. She has previously worked with the Council of Europe, the European Network Against Racism, European Roma Rights Center, and the Open Society Foundation, and is currently Senior Advocacy Officer at Ergo, advocating for policies, standards, and funding for fighting anti-Gypsyism and other forms of racism against Roma. Isabela, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dan, and also thank you, Nicoletta, and others who have actually raised and helped during those times. Myself and my direct family, we were one of the families that also were attacked. I was 12 at the time, I remember. And also on the side of my dad, many of his relatives lost their houses in Cogalniciano. So yeah, it is very personal to us, so thank you for bringing that up here. With my incursion today, I'm going to, I can only hope that I can bring some glimpse of hope in the future by sharing some of our experiences, particularly with the last two projects that we have been implementing in the past couple of years. And so, just as it has been mentioned here today, for just the context, there has been, I think, despite all of the negatives that we have heard, significant progress, at least in the discussions and debate around anti-Gypsyism as a specific form of, I would say, institutional and structural racism against Roma. and that civil society, and Roma civil society particularly, have contributed to this debate and have made sure that at least at the international level, both from the part of regional and European institutions, but also Council of Europe and others, are using terminology that we ourselves, we have contributed to and defined when it comes to anti-Gypsyism. And so we also see that there has been an important shift in the discourse from blaming the Roma, and we heard also this morning, as victims, to actually recognizing that they have been part of all of the atrocities, whether it was Holocaust, slavery, and others that are still being perpetrated against Roma today. So obviously it's very hard to talk about positives when we still see that there are still a lot of atrocities that are being perpetrated today against the Roma. And we also see that despite the fact that at EU level there has been a lot of progress, both in terms of standards on equality, more broadly non-discrimination, but also specifically on Roma when it comes to policies. And I have to admit that in terms of EU policies, on Roma we have witnessed that it is one of the most advanced specific minority policies that we have within the European Union on Roma issues. So that is all good, but then when we come on the ground and when we look at the situation of Roma, we still see that there is a lot that has to happen. We still witness a lot of the hate speech, a lot of the hate crime against Roma that goes unpunished, a lot of the perpetrators that still have the courage to commit a lot of violations against Roma, knowing very well that there are not going to be consequences for them. We see a lot of great amounts of segregation of Romani children in education. We see that Roma history, language are not being taught in schools. So there are still a lot of things that have to actually to be still improved. And so because of all of this, and also because we still see a glimpse of, if you want, hopes when it comes to the discourse of anti-Gypsyism, but also to this, it's not necessarily new concept on transitional justice, but we see that at least in the context of Europe, we start to talk more and more about transitional justice in relation to Roma. Our organization, together with partner organizations within consortium, which includes the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture, ERIAC, the European Center for Policy Studies, CEPS, but also partner organizations at national level, such as Slovo 21 in the Czech Republic, but also Central Council for German Sinti and Roma in Germany, the Union of Romani Communities in Italy, or UCRI, the Romani Association in Italy, the Roma Amare Romența Center in Romania, the Federation of Roma Association in Catalonia, or FAGIC, and Romane Ciclovne Association in Spain, and also Triescodrom in Sweden, we are currently implementing together a project that is called the EQIPEN, which is a follow-up of a previous project that Dan has mentioned, which is called CHACIPEN, which focuses this time on reclaiming, or the other title is Reclaiming Our Past, Rebuilding Our Future, New Approaches to Fighting Anti-Gypsyism Against Roma, where we are really trying to revisit, if you want, the various approaches and definitions that are related to transitional justice processes that still need to be put in place for Roma, while choosing also, in the context of this project, transitional justice as the main frame, which would hopefully allow us to maybe look better into past events, or at least that's the definition that I like to give, which is a more simplistic of what transitional justice is, to look into how past events were able to define and transform the present while offering the greatest possible justice tools and remedies to Roma. With this project, we also aim to build on the current work that has been started to address historical injustices and structural and institutional anti-Gypsyism, and address some of the structural and key institutional obstacles in achieving justice and equality for Roma in practice by tackling various aspects, such as, for instance, the lack of acknowledgement of Roma as victims of historical injustices, such as slavery or the Holocaust, the setup of adequate compensations and reconciliation processes, or the lack of mere services for and rights for the Roma, the lack of Roma museum and institutional representation of Roma in arts and culture, the lack of Roma history teaching, and so many others. The project is built on the assumption that in order to achieve Roma equality, inclusion, and participation, priority needs to be given to restore humanity and dignity of Roma and to give value to Roma identity in ways that Roma maybe were never granted before. And so with this project, we aim to explore the full potential of transitional justice tools and truth-seeking mechanisms, including the setting up of truth and reconciliation commissions and cooperating with the existing ones, or the ones that are, let's say, under constructions, like the ones in Spain or, for instance, in Germany, as they really constitute key tools to address institutionalized racism and anti-gypsyism from both historical and rule of law perspectives, and to advance the rights for individuals to know the truth, as well as remembrance, recognition, and justice. And we believe that if well designed, these commissions, along with other complementary transitional justice tools, could play a crucial role to laying down the preconditions for earned trust and to facilitating a progressive process of reconciliation. We are also trying through this project to create, if you want, a working group on defining a model for transitional justice. A working group that would also be able to be the engine to mobilizing stakeholders, mobilizing member states to set in place different steps or different aspects of transitional justice processes. And this is a working group that will function at European level and would engage with different actors, whether these are politicians, whether these are historians, whether these are policy experts, whether these are victims, Roma victims, people from the ground, community members. All of them, we need them as part of this working group to be able to help us refine and define a model of transitional justice. And so coming to a conclusion is just to say that with this project, we try to really raise awareness, where if you want, we try to put out there everything that exists with, in various countries particularly, but not limited to the countries of the project, which are the Czech Republic, Spain, Sweden, Romania, Germany, and Italy, and bring that both within the working group, but also in different spheres, both of debate, both of national and European level, so that we can meet, discuss together, and propose together a model or different models of transitional justice that potentially can be used at national level and also improve what we have. And the last point that I would make is that currently, the debates are around truth and reconciliation commissions, where commissions are on anti-gypsyism. And so in our minds, these commissions are just a part, a step, if you want, an intermediary step within a broader transitional justice process, because these commissions supposedly are there to investigate, to collect data about facts, historical facts about Roma, because we also have to determine at the same time when do we start looking into the past and how exactly we are going to go about it. So hopefully this is one of the roles these commissions can play, but to actually have a full justice served to the Roma communities, we need much more. And so that would be something that we plan to do with this project. And the partners at national level have a key roles to help us contribute to different models that hopefully we can maybe discuss next year in a similar panel. Thank you very much.
And we thank you very much, Isabella Michalaki, for sharing with us these important details of the new initiative and project, Yekipen, which builds properly on the previous one, titled Chachipen. I take note of observe the gradual shift in the discourse in society from blaming the Roma for their victimhood to actually taking steps towards acknowledging the role of the societies in perpetrating and perpetuating exclusion of Roma, and in certain cases engaging or participating in genocidal actions against them. I take note also of what is still lacking, proper institutional representation of Roma and of proper history teaching, and the importance of prioritizing on the dignity of Roma and setting up these truth-seeking mechanisms and commissions. So therefore, I wish you, I wish Ergo and its partners in this initiative the best of luck in creating the planned working group which aims to define a model of transitional justice concerning the Roma. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Michel Bouteau, advisor on minority rights from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. We'll speak about human rights protection and transitional justice approaches to combat anti-gypsyism. Michel Bouteau is a lawyer with over 25 years of experience practicing international human rights law at the United Nations, and is currently working at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights as advisor on minority rights, on strengthening the protection of the rights of persons belonging to minority and descent-based communities. Previous to the work in her current office, she worked at the International Organization for Migration as a legal advisor and at the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague as legal assistant in the appeals chamber. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with you and share a few words on behalf of the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Indeed, it is a pleasure for me to address you on the occasion of the 88th anniversary of the events of 2nd August 1944, the date now commemorated to honor the victims of the Roma Holocaust. We are here to recognize and honor the memory of Roma who were targeted by the Nazi regime, subjected to arbitrary internment, forced labor, and mass murder. The lack of recognition of the fate of Roma under the Nazi regime is often referred to as the forgotten Holocaust and has been identified as a major obstacle to restoring dignity and respect for the human rights of Roma worldwide. In memory of the hundreds of thousands of Roma and Sinti murdered in Nazi-occupied Europe, including the Roma and Sinti in the German Nazi concentration camps in Auschwitz-Birkenau, we stand here today firm and dedicated to continue bringing heightened public attention so that the Roma Holocaust becomes part of public consciousness. These victims were men, women, children, and older people. Their names should never be forgotten. Regrettably, I must emphasize that violence against Roma is not only a historical circumstance, but remains a current reality for many Roma communities, with public authorities failing to protect Roma from violent attacks. The disposition of and discrimination against Roma over centuries has led to a situation of disadvantage through generations, a disadvantage that has often ingrained hopelessness in Roma individuals and communities. While the reasons for the marginalization of Roma are complex, we will agree that there is an overarching factor that is deeply embedded. It is the social and structural discrimination against Roma worldwide, including anti-Gypsyism. Let me underline that the United Nations human rights monitoring mechanisms have repeatedly noted that Roma suffer from widespread social stigma and discrimination in various countries. And these mechanisms have made several recommendations to states, especially the states where there is a big Roma presence. They have been recommended strategies, policy measures for inclusion that take into consideration the specific conditions, situations, and needs of Roma, including Roma women. In their concluding observations, the Human Rights Committee and the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination have noted their concerns about the widespread occurrence of discrimination and violence against Roma on the basis of their identity. Allow me to highlight that the intersecting challenges of rising inequalities, divergent economic recoveries from COVID-19, armed conflicts, rising nationalism, and the climate crisis have put into jeopardy significant human rights gains the international community has made over the past decades. The human rights situation today in the world is much worse than it was 3 years ago. Disappointingly, we observe a significant gap between international human rights standards and the situation of human rights on the ground. Violence, discrimination, and exclusion continue in law and practice. At the UNOHCR, we address the situation of Roma globally through a minority rights lens, using the 4 pillars of minority rights, which involve the protection of the existence of Roma, including the prevention of violence against them, the protection and promotion of Roma identity, the guarantee of the right to non-discrimination and equality, and the guarantee of the rights of Roma to effective participation in public life, especially with regard to decisions that affect them directly. OHCHR works with partners on a range of actions aimed at strengthening human rights work to address anti-Gypsyism and encourage the implementation of public memorialization policies at national levels. We are also here to improve understanding of the situation of the Roma in many parts of the world, not only in Europe. The situation of Roma worldwide, with particular focus on anti-Gypsyism, is the subject of a 2015 report by the former UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Rights, Rita Isaac, my dear friend who is here with us today. In her report, she provides an overview of trends in state practice, highlighting positive developments as well as challenges. She draws attention to Roma women in particular, who are often confined within webs of intersecting discrimination that deprive them of their human rights and condemn them to lives of poverty and exclusion. A key recommendation in Rita's report was that more attention should be paid to the specific challenges faced by Roma living outside of Europe. The Special Rapporteur concluded at the time, and I'm sure she still believes in the same, that the invisibility of Roma outside of Europe remains a challenge, and that more should be done to highlight their situation and raise their profile with policymakers while also helping to empower the communities. The recommendations in the Special Rapporteur's report triggered a series of activities by my office. These activities were designed to strengthen protection of Roma rights with particular focus on the Americas, involving representatives of Roma communities from Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. It is within this context that OHCHR and partners support this current mission by facilitating the participation of Roma human rights defenders from the Americas to this commemorative event. With Roma voices sitting at the table, states can better identify gaps in laws and policies to make sure that they are more just. So problems can be quickly reported and solutions that work for everyone can be found, and states can reach compliance with their international human rights legal obligations. The Roma are not passive victims of discrimination. Sadly, the historical injustices committed against Roma have eroded trust between Roma and non-Roma. Across the regions, insufficient effort has been made to foster long-term, durable intercultural dialogue or to develop initiatives that build trust and foster relationships of mutual respect. In this regard, we do need to examine the past and trace the roots of discrimination against Roma in order to dismantle it. As such, important components of justice, truth, and reconciliation processes must be part of the mix. UNHCR believes that much can be achieved through transitional justice processes. Transitional justice processes and also their mechanisms to help usher in recognition of victims, enhance trust of individuals in state institutions, reinforce respect for human rights, and promote the rule of law as a step towards reconciliation and the prevention of new violations. Transitional justice is a pragmatic problem-solving instrument rooted in human rights that offers solutions to the dilemmas of justice, peace, and prevention. Transitional justice is transformative justice, in fact. An approach to justice that addresses gender imbalances is rooted in local realities and is based on broad consultation and effective participation of all concerned. UNOHCHR, through its work on transitional justice, has repeatedly demonstrated that the office can help address grievances and divisions. The office is engaged in advocacy and policy development on transitional justice for Roma by supporting and advising on issues related to justice, by developing policy tools, by providing guidance and strategic frameworks. For example, OHCHR, in collaboration with other partners, convened an international stock-taking roundtable in 2022 on Roma and memorialization, which focused inter alia on examining ways of combating anti-Gypsyism and anti-Roma racism by advancing truth, recognition, reparations, trust and reconciliation processes at local, national, and international levels. I'm almost there. As part of this wider process, in 2023, the OHCHR began intensive advocacy for memorialization outside of Europe, and in 2024, the office, together with partners, launched a crowdsourced Romani memory map for the Americas to support overcoming the invisibility of Roma in their societies worldwide. This work will continue beyond 2024 as we advance recognition and remedy for the dark chapters of the past and their impact on the present. After all, memorization is just one aspect of the transitional justice mechanisms we need to put into motion. Today, however, we are here to acknowledge the magnitude of disaster that can result from hatred. Unfortunately, hatred, exclusion, and segregation are still with us. So a lot of work needs to be done. Let me underline that UN efforts to fight anti-Roma discrimination and address Roma marginalization and disadvantage have brought in some positive developments. However, time and again, the deep-rooted problems of discrimination and socioeconomic marginalization experienced by Roma worldwide have exposed the underlying depth of the structural discrimination that has been set in motion for centuries. Such deep-seated discrimination requires that we take a deep dive into the past to address the past injustice against Roma. Let us recapture the spirit of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights as we unite in our efforts so that the ambitions of the Universal Declaration do not remain an aspiration, but translate on the ground in the full realization of the human rights of the Roma people. I thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for having taken a little bit longer than I should, and I look forward to our conversation to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bouteau. I take note of the aspect you mentioned about the violence against Roma not being only a historical circumstance, but also occurring nowadays. And as we know it, unfortunately, often the perpetrators of these racist acts, they escape justice. And not only that, but these failures to serve justice as a legal obligation have eroded trust of Roma in the institutions. And this can only be repaired and reinstated if justice, truth, and reconciliation are really part of every actions in order to restore and rebuild that trust, which is very much needed between state authorities and the Roma. We also thank you for supporting the participation of our Roma fellows from Americas to this series of events here in Krakow and in the Auschwitz Museum. Thank you, Rita, for the report on Roma. From 2015, I think there is already about time to have a new report with all the developments that happened in the meantime. And I'm looking forward to see the outcomes of this crowdsourced project, which maps the situation of Roma in the Americas from the memorization perspective, which I hope will continue. Thank you very much. And now we have a couple of questions. Mr. Piotr, if you could please help us project those two questions. And you have the two questions. Please, shortly, you're strongly encouraged to announce yourself, to express your reflections and try to answer these questions. Please, the floor is open, so who wants to take the floor first? The questions. But the questions were shared with you. They are projected now for the audience, yeah. But I can read them, all right? So the question number one is, what are, in your opinion, the main prerequisites for governments to embark on the process of transitional justice, which would include, among other, recognizing the Roma Holocaust, the Roma slavery, where relevant, and other past or current atrocities perpetrated against Roma, and take systematic and progressive steps to significantly advance Roma justice, equality, and inclusion. So I avoided to read it out like that because it's a complex question, but if you would have it in written in front of you, it will make it easier to understand it. That's the question number one. And it also hints about rebuilding trust between the Roma state institutions and the general public. And the question number two, what are some good practices or examples that you could share which help promoting cooperation between Roma civil society and authorities on Roma truth, recognition, reconciliation, and remembrance, as well as teaching about Roma history and culture in educational settings? So the first is about the main prerequisites for the governments to work towards proper recognition, reconciliation, trust building, and so on. And the second question is about your knowledge of first-hand or close knowledge of good practices, of examples of cooperation between Roma civil society and state authorities to do this, help build trust for proper recognition, for remembrance, for reconciliation. Yeah. Thank you. Please. I'm looking forward to see hands. Okay, so I see Isabella Mihalake first, please. If you can say, please, for which question? Is it question on number one on main prerequisites for the governments? Okay.
Yes, I will start with question number one, and I think also for question number two, probably also the public. I don't know if there is a possibility for them to also share their experiences with this. But in terms of the question number one, what I find it's an important prerequisite, which has always been a challenge, is to have within our member states political stability, and more than that, if you want, a constant political will and commitment from both the political leadership, but also its government committed to fighting anti-gypsyism against Roma, but also specifically committed to starting or embarking upon a process of transitional justice for Roma. And so if we are to look, for instance, in what is happening in Europe today, at European level, especially with the results of the European elections from June this year, we see even a greater shift towards the far right, the populist discourse within the big family, European political family. And we see that this has been reflected more and more within the political spectrum of the European Parliament, where we have witnessed a bigger fragmentation than before, with increasing seats, both like the center-right, but also with the populist and far-right groups within the European Parliament, and an important loss of seats within the left side, if you will, or the progressive parties, that also have been reflected within the presence or the composition of the various committees within the European Parliament that would routinely work on Roma issues as well, the ones that are dealing with fundamental rights, freedoms and liberties, culture, employment. You will see that in the future is going to be harder and harder to reach a level of negotiation or agreements for certain issues, because there's going to be much harder to have votes or from the left side, and therefore it's going to be extremely hard to push for initiatives via the European Parliament that would definitely impact the national level in terms of legislation, funds, programs, and so forth. And also we have seen that again in a long time we don't have a Roma member of the European Parliament, which was a way, if you will, to also be able to propose legislative initiatives within the European Parliament. So it's going to be much harder to push for any issues that would have to deal with equality, anti-racism, anti-gypsyism, and even specifically on transitional justice processes. And therefore, in this context where I see it's so key to work much more and invest much more, it's the civil society. It's the Roma civil society. They will have to yet again, as they have done so remarkably during the COVID-19 crisis, to take a leading role and to play the role of many actors that are failing basically on the Roma agenda, and therefore we would need to capacitate them more so that they understand more the issues and they are able to take leadership, are able to insert themselves within the policy discussions and be there at the decision tables. And also, I feel that the important prerequisite for the governments is to really be able to choose a particular model of transitional justice that not only works for the country but serves the Roma. And so there is again an important role for all of us to take that work forward and also to play a leading role. So not necessarily wait or even I would dare say, allow the governments to have a direct say over it, but basically us taking a leading role to advise the governments in what would be the best model that would represent or serve the communities in that particular country in terms of transitional justice. Funding, obviously, it's one of the important prerequisites, and when it comes to justice issues more broadly, governments don't have a lot of budget. They don't necessarily budget for justice issues. They budget for war, right? Ironically, they budget for other issues, but not for this one. So it's really important that going forward, we are also able to lobby much more the next programming period when it comes to fundamental rights issues, which is less and less an important part of the European agenda. I'll keep it short. I'll end here because there is, I'm looking around me and there is no more time, and let the microphone to someone else.
Thank you very much, Isabella. And because of the time constraints now, we jump straight forward with a comment from Ms. Bouteau, and then we conclude with a session to reach the plenary again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will be very brief. I think that Isabella touched on some very important points, some of which I wanted to make, but I would be repetitive. But I think the most important message that I would like to leave with you is to encourage you to engage with the international human rights mechanisms. I know that a large population of Roma live in Europe, and you are very much invested with respect to the European system of human rights, but don't forget the international human rights processes that exist, the different mechanisms, especially the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on minority rights. And there's also the Forum on Minority Rights that I'm engaged in very much, but at which we have yearly meetings, and I barely ever notice Roma activists, Roma civil society present at those fora. So I would encourage you, really, if you want to approach me, I would be happy to discuss with you, but your engagement at the international level in Geneva, it's not too far from you who live in Europe, to engage further with us, and I'm here to provide you whatever support that you may need in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for the call for participation and collaboration. And with this, we conclude our session. I apologize for not having time to engage with the audience because of the time constraints. I thank very much also all our panelists. And with this, the session is closed. Thank you.